WADR, promoting dialogue.
Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to the third edition of Newslink. First, our top stories. Electoral Empire of Nigeria INEC receives 110 applications for political party registration.
We wish to reassure Nigerians that under the current situation, we will continue to be guided by law and act with fairness to all associations seeking registration as political parties.
And Ghana suspended Chief Justice Tokono says her removal has breached the constitution as government spokesperson counters.
Unfortunately, every step of the removal process being undertaken against me is being done in a manner that breaks every rule.
From the very first steps in this matter, the president has kept fidelity to the constitution. Everything he has done has been by the book.
Chadian opposition leader Success Masra begins hunger strike in detention, and Liberian education authorities shut down 31 unlawful universities and suspend 22 licenses. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
Let's begin in Nigeria with a couple of stories. First, with an update on the Benue killing, as the Inspector General of Police has confirmed the arrest of suspects in connection with the recent massacre in Yaliwata Community, Benue State, North Central Region. This follows a presidential directive to bring the perpetrators to justice after the killing of over 100 residents. WADR's Abuja correspondent Yachenu Sasetu has the details.
The Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, on Tuesday announced the arrest of 26 suspects linked to the Yaliwata massacre in Benue State. He made this known while addressing journalists at the force headquarters in Abuja.
I must acknowledge that the breakthroughs we have recorded both in Benue and Plateau states would not have been possible without the strong collaboration and synergy with all security agencies. The Nigerian police force continues to work hand in hand with the military, DSS, NSCDC, and other partners in the pursuit of one common goal, to safeguard the lives and property of every Nigerian citizen.
The arrests are coming days after President Bola Tinubu, during a stakeholders meeting at the government house in Makurdi, directed the IGP and the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, to act swiftly in apprehending those responsible for the gruesome killings. Meanwhile, Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa has expressed concern over Nigeria's failure to conduct a national census, warning that the absence of reliable population data is compromising both internal security and the country's international standing.
And for us in the security forces, we're not having it easy. Abroad, why is it that when somebody commits an offense, it's easier for them to arrest? It's because there's data. It's either they get your thumbprint or they get your face or they have your address, your name. They can always choose who you are. Can we say the same thing for Nigeria? Do we know who are the Nigerians? Our borders are porous. Anybody can come in and go out and do at will.
The development signals a renewed commitment by security agencies to end the cycle of violence in parts of Benue State and restore public confidence in the nation's ability to protect lives. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) has confirmed receiving over 110 applications from political groups seeking registration ahead of the 2027 general elections. Chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, who disclosed this on Wednesday, noted that the requests are being processed in line with the relevant laws and Commission's regulations and guidelines. Some of the aspiring political movements have accused the Commission of delaying the process and failing to issue timely acknowledgement. However, INEC insists that due diligence is necessary and says steps are being taken to improve transparency, including plan to automate the registration process. Here is the Commission's chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu.
I've acknowledged all requests received so far, except 6 of them received recently, which will be done before the end of the week. For emphasis, I wish to inform Nigerians, particularly those interested in registering new political parties, that the handbook containing the regulations and guidelines for political parties 2022 is already available from the Commission's website. We wish to reassure Nigerians that under the current situation, we will continue to be guided by law and act with fairness to all associations seeking registration as political parties. We will treat all requests fairly, irrespective of the status of their promoters, be they ordinary or prominent citizens.
And that's the INEC Commission Chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu. Still staying in Nigeria, at least 17 soldiers were killed in northern region of the country when gunmen stormed 3 army base. The army, in a statement on Wednesday, said some soldiers paid the supreme price in the day-long battles, while 4 troops wounded in action are currently receiving treatment for their gunshot wounds. 2 security sources said gunmen launched a surprise attack at the army's forward operating base in Kwana Duche Marigan and the Boka areas in Niger State and another base in neighboring Kaduna State, battling troops for several hours. The northern, western and northern eastern region of Nigeria have been traumatized by armed gangs, locally as bandits. For several years now, these bandits typically engage in kidnapping for ransom and target security forces. Away from Nigeria, Africa is at the heart of EU security concerns, according to the Europol 2025 published report. The European agency described the sharp rise in power of terrorist groups linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda across the continent, particularly in the Sahel, Somalia and Mozambique, turning these areas into operational recruitment and propaganda platforms with spillovers effects on European soils. Europol noted that these unstable regions are drawing a growing number of foreign terrorist fighters seeking new battlefronts after the retreat from Syria and Iran. Emoedet has the details.
According to Europol, the Sahel, especially the 3 border area, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, is seeing the deepening entrenchment of Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM, affiliated with Al-Qaeda and Islamic State in the Sahel province, ISSP. These groups are expanding their influence and now pose a threat to coastal West African states. The report further added that in East Africa, Al-Shabaab linked to Al-Qaeda continues to control large parts of Somalia. In Puntland, ISIS is strengthening its stronghold using it as a regional logistics base. Beyond their territorial control, these African groups play a central role in international terrorism communication strategy. The report points to their online propaganda networks as key drivers of remote radicalization, particularly targeting young Europeans through social media and multilingual content. Meanwhile, Europe recorded 58 terrorist attacks in 2024, 24 of which were attributed to jihadism, resulting in 5 deaths and 18 injuries. 289 arrests related to jihadist terrorism were made within the EU, with a growing number of young people and even minors being radicalized, often through foreign content, especially from Africa. Europol warns that the growing ideological, operational, and logistical overlap between Africa and Europe presents a structural threat. The report calls for stronger security cooperation with African partner countries to better anticipate the risk of terrorist return or cross-border operations into the EU.
Emoedet filed the report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let me take you to Ghana for some development in the country, because the Vice President, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, is urging a bold shift in how African countries finance development, warning that the days of relying heavily on foreign aids are numbered. Speaking at the 2025 Ghana Civil Society Forum on the theme Reimagining Development Financing and Civic Action, Challenges, Opportunities and the Way Forward, the Vice President called for, among others, a rethink of traditional models of boosting domestic resource mobilization. She also announced that a non-profit bill is in the offing to support civic society, foster consensus building, and encourage increase in local investments. WADR's Accra correspondent Nadi Tete reports.
Ghana and other African countries must take bold steps to reduce aid dependency and strengthen domestic resource mobilization as global development financing becomes increasingly uncertain. That's according to Ghana's Vice President, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, who was speaking at the opening of the two-day Ghana Civil Society Forum 2025 on the theme Reimagining Development Financing and Civic Action, Challenges, Opportunities and the Way Forward. The Vice President pointed to declining aid flows, political shifts in donor countries, and shrinking access to concessional financing as clear signs that traditional development models are no longer sustainable. Professor Opoku-Agyeman outlined steps the government is already pursuing, including broadening the tax base, reforming public financial management systems, and tapping into new financing tools such as climate finance, diaspora bonds, and sovereign wealth vehicles. She also stressed the importance of civic participation, saying real development requires citizens to actively monitor resource use and influence national priorities. The Vice President further reiterated government's commitment to passing the non-profit bill.
Now, they did with that report. Meanwhile, Ghana's suspended Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo has challenged the constitutionality of her removal from post as Chief Justice. Speaking according to the embattled Chief Justice, every step taken to remove her from office by the new John Dramani Mohammed's administration has breached the Constitution of the Republic. Addressing a press conference today, which marks the first time publicly speaking since her suspension, she said she finds it critical to draw the attention of the nation to the serious violation of the Constitution and the law in the process, and that it is a cause of danger and that it does not hold for the development of the nation's development.
Is historic. In all of Ghana's 68-year history as an independent republic, there has never been a hearing for the removal of the Chief Justice. One would therefore have hoped that if such a process becomes necessary, it would provide good guidance and precedent for nation building. Unfortunately, every step of the removal process being undertaken against me is being done in a manner that breaks every rule on how justice is delivered in our country. The second reason for making this statement is though the process alone, its effects ripple far beyond me as a person. This process will affect how all Superior Court justices and future Chief Justices may be removed from office. And when I provided these answers, I also added with evidence to prove that each allegation was either a lie, a wrong opinion about how work is conducted in the judicial service, a wrong opinion on the work of judges, or a wrong opinion on the duties of a Chief Justice.
Suspended Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo. Recall Justice Torkornoo was suspended on April 22, 2025 by President John Mahama after 3 petitions prompted a prima facie determination with the Council of State concerting and a 5-member inquiry committee established under Article 146 of the 1992 Constitution. But in a swift reaction immediately after her press conference, the Ghanaian presidency responded in what it terms as correction of erroneous claims. Government Communications Minister Felix Kwakye Ofosu described her presser as a regrettable one, one that expressed government commitment to upholding the rule of law irrespective of status and political colors. Felix Ofosu Kwakye further added that the president has not in any way acted unconstitutional. Here is the Government Communications Minister Felix Ofosu Kwakye.
A number of things were said at the media engagement that, if left uncorrected, could create an erroneous impression and project government in a very unfair, unjust, unwarranted light. We are compelled, however, to correct certain misimpressions that were created at the briefing. To begin with, let me point out that as yet, nobody has been able to ascribe any known verifiable constitutional breach to the president in the way that he has handled this particular matter. From the very first steps in this matter, the president has kept fidelity to the constitution. Everything he has done has been by the book. That is why all those who have commented on the matter, including her ladyship, the Chief Justice, have been unable to point to any specific provision under Article 146 that the president has been in breach of. So in summary, I would say that what has happened today is most regrettable. And as government, or as the President Mahama is committed to upholding the rule of law. We cannot have a situation where, depending on who is involved, the constitution is set aside. All Ghanaians are equal before the law, in the same way that our courts have dealt with individuals in accordance to law.
Government Communications Minister Phyllis Ofosu-Kwakye. You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM from Dakar, Senegal, and around the world on wadr.org. We're also live on Facebook at WADR English Service, as well as YouTube at WADR News. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Electoral Empire in Nigeria, INEC receives 110 applications for political party registration. And Ghana suspended Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo says her removal from office is a breach of the constitution as government spokesperson counters. Still ahead in the news, Chadian opposition leader Success Masra begins hunger strike in detention, and Liberian education authorities shut down 31 unlawful universities and suspend 22 licenses. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Chad, prominent opposition figure and former Prime Minister Success Masra has begun a hunger strike while in detention, sparking renewed concerns over political repression and the state of justice in the country. Masra, who has been held at the coordination of the judicial police in N'Djamena since May 16, informed his party, Les Transformateurs, of his decision through a handwritten letter from the prison cells. Abdullah Hassan has the details in this report.
According to the party, the letter was received on Tuesday, June 24, marking the 40th day of his incarceration. In response, the party announced that the contents of Masra's letter will be publicly read at 4 p.m. local time at their headquarters, also known as the Balcony of Hope, where supporters have been called to gather in solidarity. Masra is facing serious charges including incitement to hatred, murder and assassination, all linked to the May 14 massacre of members of the Fulani community in the village of Mandakau. The incident triggered national and international alarm over rising ethnic tensions and alleged human rights violations. Authorities placed Masra in pre-trial detention and his case remains under judicial investigation. His legal team, however, argues that the charges are politically motivated, describing the situation as a targeted crackdown on dissent. Masra's hunger strike is widely seen as a form of protest against what he describes as unjust imprisonment and the broader political climate under the current administration. Human rights groups and opposition activists are closely watching the situation, warning that it could inflame political tensions in a country already grappling with instability following recent elections and violent clashes. Calls are growing for international observers to intervene and for the Chadian government to uphold due process and human rights standards.
Abdullah Hassan filed the report. Back here in Sierra Leone, the Ministry of Finance has published its budget execution reports for the fourth quarter of 2024 and the first quarter of 2025. Total revenues mobilized in the first quarter of 2025 amount to more than 1,000 billion CFA francs, an increase of 9.7% compared to 2024. The document also indicates that external resources are low. Only 3.27% of unexpected external resources have been mobilized, limiting investment financing. What impact could this have on the Senegalese economy? We discussed this with Souleymane Keita, an economist and researcher, professor at the Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar.
Si vous avez remarqué la structure de la dette, vous avez constaté que nos aides...
If you've noticed the debt structure, you would see that the Senegalese government is going into debt. That is to say, the Senegalese government's current strategy is to increase its debt under controlled conditions. But I often say that the Senegalese government's revenue cannot allow us to meet the number of challenges at the moment, including the evolution of our public finances and also the evolution of a number of our macroeconomic indicators. So, what they can do now is to move towards what we call debt management in a controlled manner. But we can't perhaps gradually reduce it today, because today the economic system that has been put in place based on debt structure doesn't allow the central government to meet a number of these commitments without resorting to external sources, because the internal mechanism of the economy doesn't generate enough revenue to meet our spending needs. That's what's causing us problems. That is to say, when you borrow to repay debt or when you borrow to reduce consumption, you automatically doesn't have enough production capacity to repay that debt. So otherwise, you all remain in the debt spiral. But what do we need to do now? It's to put in place an economic system that allows us to borrow, but that debt will be channeled into an investment space that will be profitable in the long term. Dr. Souleymane Keita is an economist and a research professor with the Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar. Elsewhere, in a sweeping crackdown on unaccredited higher educational institutions, the National Commission on Higher Education, NCHE, in Liberia has ordered the immediate closure of 31 universities and colleges founded to be operating illegally. Additionally, the regulatory body has suspended the licenses of 22 other institutions effectively today. The list of colleges and universities whose licenses have been suspended include Greater Vision College of Health Science and the Liberian Christian College, African International Institute of Science and Technology, and Kings and Queens University College, just to name a few. Addressing a press briefing, the INEC director, NCHE Director General Dr. Edward Wonkeyo, outlined the details of the decision, which he says was based on a nationwide assessment conducted by the Commission.
Proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in June 2022, this annual observance honors women diplomats, addresses gender disparities within diplomatic circles, and inspires more women to pursue leadership roles in international affairs. Deputy Foreign Minister Deward Gray, speaking on behalf of Liberia's Foreign Minister, reaffirmed the country's dedication to increasing women's representation in diplomatic spaces.
For centuries, diplomacy was a realm where the voices of women were too often unheard. But history remembers trailblazers like Angie Brooks Randall, Ruth Gibson Caesar, Amelia Ward, Teresa Lee Sherman, Mary Brownell.
UN Resident Coordinator Christine Omotunin underscored the importance of the event, stressing the United Nations' unwavering commitment to advancing women's development and participation in diplomacy.
Let us reaffirm our commitment to advocating for an equitable future. Let us lift our voices together to ensure that the next generation of women diplomats can raise.
Additionally, UN Women Liberia Country Representative Comfort Langton proposed strategic measures to create a gender-responsive diplomatic community.
The first is to invest in a gender-responsive diplomatic pipeline, which I know is already underway, by expanding access to foreign service training, leadership development, and mentorship for women and girls. The second is to integrate gender equality in the foreign policy and national law.
According to a 2024 Women in Diplomacy Index, only 20% of Africa's ambassadors are women. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Politics
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest interview segment this evening focuses on Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's tenure as chairperson of the ECOWAS, Authority of Heads of State and Regional Bodies' highest decision-making office on policies and actions. Tinubu was nominated in 2023 to head the organization shortly after being sworn in for the first time as leader of the African giant. While his election was marred with alleged irregularities, Tinubu assumed the Nigerian presidency faced with plethora of issues from poor economy to corruption and general insecurity. Dennis Endo, vice president of the Senegalese Human Rights League, provides analysis of President Tinubu's tenure.
I think, very weak performance, because we were really dealing with peace for the sub-region, as you know, with the movement of IS. I think this is one of the biggest lack of diplomacy, successful diplomacy. We expect to have an ECOWAS where we have all countries from the West African, from the region, where everybody join. That's one thing. The second thing, that we know that those people who are moving for the economical side, they're always complaining. Women as well, they're always complaining. And I didn't talk about youth. So to me that obviously we cannot say that his term was really successful term.
Some people blame, the lack of perceived and experience for the way he handled the Niger coup d'etat with an attempt to invade the country as well as closing the borders with Niger. That, for some people believe, led to Mali and Burkina Faso withdrawing from the Burkina Faso withdrawing from the bloc. Do you blame him for that as well? Do you think he could have handled it better?
Yes, of course, because everything is about diplomacy. When diplomacy is successful, we never talk about utilizing forces. And whenever you want to utilize forces, most of the time is more for the civil than the military, So at the end, we cannot talk about ECOWAS of people where there is a problem, the leaders will use forces to solve the problem. So I think that was a really big mistake. And this new president has to work on, even though the IS, they might not gonna say that they're gonna dissolve their organization with them, to make sure they're still part of the region in terms of economical way and in terms of social way, because we need to move from country to country. We need to move not only for social issues, but also economical reason.
In that case, how would you rate his leadership?
I think he was more passive. If I have to give a grade out of 10, I will just say 5 out of 10, because he really didn't realize much. Sometimes you can have the intention of doing things, but at the end, population are not waiting for intention. They're waiting for practice. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. So that's why I said that if I have to give a grade, I will say 5 out of 10.
Dennis Endo is the vice president of the Senegalese Human Rights League. In sports this evening, veteran football journalist and consultant Aliou Goloko has officially announced his candidacy for president of the Senegalese Football Federation FSF. In his campaign statement titled Statement of Faith, Goloko outlined a bold 4-year plan focused on infrastructure, upgrade, grassroots access, and youth development and the promotion of women's football. And that's how we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. Thank you for listening. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Njai for the technical assistance. I am Christopher Ticho. Good evening.